Unshelling Medicine Podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Hello, welcome everybody. Today I have Angela Blanco. Angela Blanco is the founder of Fluency Lab. We're going to talk about Fluency Lab and what it stands for, what it does, and our conversation is going to be based on that. So it's a bit of a multi-faceted conversation. So that's something that we have something for everybody, and especially with people who may speak a second language or have English as their second language. So let's get into it. Hi, Angela. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Hello. Thank you for your invitation, Idongesit. I'm really happy to be here. I'm doing great. Yeah.
Great to hear. We are grateful that you made time to talk to us today or have this conversation with us today. So when we're thinking about or talking about Fluency Lab, what is Fluency Lab and what does Fluency Lab do?
Well, in general, I can say we're a Spanish school that operates online, right? So, that's like the big picture of it. Mm-hmm. We work specifically with professionals in the USA in some specific industries, and one of them is healthcare. So we work with all the healthcare staff who are facing this need of communicating in Spanish with some of their patients. So yeah, that's our main goal, to help them, because I know that the conditions and the schedule and the way that adults we have to get through life is different. So we specialize in making this process of learning a second language possible for people who have a very complicated schedule, let's say.
Well, I don't think that is something that a lot of people recognize is a big need in healthcare. Speaking a second language or even having translation in a second language. What percentage would you say your clientele is in relations to healthcare? Is healthcare the majority of the clients that you get?
Now that you say about the importance that some people maybe now understand or are discovering about Spanish in healthcare, it was also a discovery for me, because I always worked with grown-ups. That's my whole studies and the way I approach the things, my methodologies, always thinking about how to teach a second language or help a person to speak a second language being an adult, because when you're a child, it's a different process. So that was something that was my first approach to it. But on the way, I start receiving lots of people from healthcare, saying this, I don't have too much time, but I want to get this. I really want to communicate with my patients or with their families. So I started finding the need there for something that works for them. Mm-hmm. That's why my clientele grew. It was specifically on that industry. Most of them, I would say that right now, probably 80% of our students, specifically from healthcare. So it was a discovery for me, and that's why now I work with them. And that's why now my content and all the approach that I have for this type of clients is focused on helping them to understand the clients, right? Beautiful. And the patients, of course. Yeah.
Beautiful. And, how much of those doctors, nurses, or healthcare providers in general, including social workers, who are now learning Spanish as a second language, how much of them have even expressed to you the need for having maybe an interpreter or translator while they're working to improve their Spanish? Because it is a learning process. You're learning a second language, and most people who are trying to understand a second language maybe have no basis of another language, right? If you at least speak another language, it makes it easier to learn something new, right? But as an adult who's lost that elasticity that children have, it can be a process to learn a second language. Do you see that, or do you ever have a client who asks for maybe one of your staff to work as a translator, or is that something that you don't do?
No, we only focus on the education. So we help them. Our methodology is based on helping them to communicate themselves in Spanish, to acquire the language and to be able to use it directly. Something that some of them have commented is that sometimes they can find an interpreter, but sometimes they're not available during their shifts. Yeah. And even in some cases, they don't want to lose complete control of what is happening. They feel a bit like, I wish I was able to be a bit closer to monitor a bit more the process of the translation, so I know everything is said properly, or that it's not going to give any chance for misunderstandings or things like that. So I think that's the first approach. It's like, maybe I'm not going to be the master of Spanish. I'm not going to be able to talk about politics, blah, 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 or whatever other complicated topics. I want to be able to make sure that the process is smooth, right? And that I can help and build a bridge if it's needed, if something is missing, or if the interpreter maybe missed this or that, I can be there to double check and to make sure that the patient is clear or their family is clear about what is happening. So that's the feeling. I think it's something a bit more than transactional. I don't know. It's more emotional. They really want to be able to be there to control the process and be there for helping in the whole communication. So that's what I found. And that's how we help them. We work on helping them to communicate more than offering services for translation.
Beautiful. And I'm so happy you said that, because not every interpreter is the same. The interpreters that actually take the process very, seriously, in a sense that they do interpret word for word what the client says. But those interpreters are very few. And even that whole process of having a middle person is very time consuming. And, in a very busy healthcare setting. So there's usually things missed. I'm speaking from experience in using a translator. There's usually either things missed that the translator may not feel is important to communicate. But even those little nuances of communication, even if it's like just a huff, a puff, or idiom, something like that, it may not to you sound like something you should tell me as a provider. But for me, I need to know that, because what about this process is making you so exasperated that you are lamenting? So I do understand that emotional connection, having a real-time conversation where you understand every single word, or you can pull out every single word. So kudos to the providers who are coming to learn from you, because that is an extra investment, on themselves to provide that value-based care. So what are the success stories that you have had from your school with the providers that come to you?
Yeah, well, you're right. I was thinking, of course, taking your question and what you said, that at the same time, we want to be able to understand every single word, but that's the goal. Right. And that's where we want to get. However, I have been helping them to comprehend that in the process of reaching that goal, sometimes even being able to take some important keywords in the speech is already taking, it's already an improvement, and gives them a bit more of the control that I was, talking about, being able to understand what the other person is saying. So something, one of the stories that comes to my mind right now is what happens in emergency rooms sometimes when, they have expressed that the other person, the person who maybe their first language is not English, and maybe they can communicate some stuff, but they're not really fluent. They really don't know how to say it. When they're in this moment of distress, or their family, the situation gets even more complicated. So everyone who has been trying to communicate in a second language before knows quite well that emotions get on the way. I mean, that happens to us even when we take a test, right? One thing is when we're studying for the test. Another thing is when we take the test and the emotions are on the way. Something like that would happen and will double. I think it's even worse when you're in a moment when emotions are on the way. So what one of my students said is, she was very happy because she said, in that moment, I am the professional. I'm used to this level of stress. I'm used to talk with people who are facing difficulties in that moment. So emotionally, I'm a bit relaxed in comparison to them. So what I want is, to say, well, we can meet on the way. Maybe my Spanish is not perfect. Maybe your English is not perfect either, but I'm right now calmer and I can help you. I can walk more of the path, maybe give an 80% and you give the other 20
Right.
to know exactly what is going on and how I can help. So I love that approach because I thought that's exactly the point. Maybe you cannot understand every single word yet because it's a process and every time you're getting better and better. But we know that it's a path to walk. But she said it's already being able to, get that 80% and be there for that person who in that moment probably, their English is just out of the way. It's just so complicated in that moment to explain anything that I am the one who needs to be there to understand. I'm the professional. I'm the one who can help. So that's why she needed Spanish in that case. So that's one of those stories that is great. It's just when she says, and I was able to do it, and sometimes I receive some WhatsApps from the students like, today use this word that you told me last time, or we were talking about this and I was able to, smile back and make a comment to the person. Even if the interpreter was there, I was already reacting in real time to what the person was saying because I knew what they were talking about. So even with the translation, to double check and to make sure that no misunderstandings are happening, I was able to create rapport right away. So the patient understood that I knew what they were talking about in the moment that they were talking. And for them, to be able to get to that point after some months, maybe, of studying the language for the first time is, it's priceless. It's just great. And I love hearing those stories because I think, you're creating that connection that you crave as a professional because you miss it. You know how it feels when you speak in your mother tongue. And now you want to reach the same level when you speak in Spanish and you're getting there. So I think it's that.
That's beautiful. It actually makes me happy to hear that because there's a certain level of satisfaction that you get when, you're able to help somebody in a way that feels comfortable for them. And it's just, it's a beautiful feedback to receive things like that from, people that are your clients or in your school. So typically, so that, whoever's listening to us, typically what is the duration of learning that you have seen typically in the students where, they spend however many weeks, however many months, and they feel like, okay, they're in a place of being comfortable. And what is the frequency of meeting? Is it like a one-on-one coaching or is it like segmented into like online courses? How is that your program organized?
Yeah, well, the program is mainly one-to-ones.
Okay.
That's what gives us the opportunity to address questions and also give the comfort to that student to make mistakes and to experiment on the way and not having other eyes, looking at them because we're adults and we have this fear of looking and making mistakes in front of other people. But when it's one-to-one, it's a bit more relaxed. It's like, I'm learning and I can, receive the answer to my questions right away. So that's that's the main service we offer, but we also give them some extra material that they can review because we're aware of the complications in terms of time, right? Let's say. So there is an hour a week, kind of the most common. Some people commit to 2 hours a week to meet and talk. That's normally how it works. So we try to keep it that way. And on the process, like in between those sessions, they have some content that they can consume, they can listen to while they're driving, for example, like something that is realistic, right? Because of course we all want to get an intensive course when we learn the Spanish in, 3 months or something like that, because we're just committing to it day and night and we breathe Spanish and everything is happening. But that's not going to happen because you have to keep working. You have your family, you have everything. So it's like, okay, if that's not realistic, let's make Spanish part of your routine, included in what you already have. So if you have to drive to the hospital, if you have to drive to the grocery shop or to the supermarket, listen to it. Listen to what is these conversations that are happening between a patient and a professional. What is happening there. So we try to help with all those extra resources to improve the process that is happening in the one-to-ones. Now, your question about how long it takes, it's really one of the biggest questions everyone has, because I can tell you probably if it's once a week, it could take, I don't know, from 12 months if you think about it, 52 hours to start seeing a big change. However, we have seen changes in 6-9 months is when we start seeing that the person is already getting the grip of it, as you say. I don't know. English is not my first language. I'm trying.
Got it.
but yeah, you're getting the idea of it. You're just feeling more comfortable and more in control of what is happening. Yeah, you can see that already in 6 to 9 months of data. But also depends a lot on your previous experiences. So some people say, yeah, I took some Spanish at school and I actually liked it. So I learned, right? I learned some words here and there. Some others say, what happened at school is a mystery to me. I don't remember more than hola. So that person is going to have a different process and their ability to keep the curiosity. I think that's the secret. I keep talking about that. And I don't know if it's a talent or what, but the people who are questioning, say, I was in the supermarket, and I was wondering, how do I say that? How do I say to buy? How do I say to change? How in Spanish? That type of person who is constantly asking themselves, I want to, those people speed up the process. So it's very unique, because when they say, okay, so how long is going to take me to learn the language? For me, it's always like, well, let's wait and see, because probably it's going to be faster than what I'm going to tell you, or maybe it's going to be slower than what I'm going to tell you. But yeah, I'm taking a big risk here for giving you these numbers, because it's never perfect.
It doesn't matter what you do. It depends on the learner. It depends on how much that learner apply themselves, right? So if you apply yourself by asking questions, you're going to have the resources to answer those questions and you're going to know. But if you only want to utilize that 1 hour a week and that is it, then, your learning might take a little more time. So it very much depends on the learner. So don't worry about it. Disclaimer. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because I never give numbers. Right now I'm just taking a big risk, because I say, I cannot promise you. Is in the cautious and terms of service. It's like, I cannot commit to this. It could change. It could be different. Every person is different.
That's true. So I am a bit familiar with the Spanish language, right? And I do understand that the nuances and some slang, with each group. Okay. Puerto Ricans don't say everything exactly the way Dominicans say it. Dominicans don't say everything the way I would say somebody from Venezuela, even Colombia, or even Spain, right? So how do we, as learners, providers who want to learn Spanish, deal with all of that when, there are like different, I don't want to call them dialect, but in a sense that there are different nuances to how each group communicates. Is that something that you take into consideration when you are teaching? So something like ¿qué tal? Not everybody says ¿qué tal? Right? Not everybody says it, that is kind of like, there's a professional and casual way of saying things, right? So do you teach both, or do you just focus on the professional way? Because not every patient is going to present and say things the way you would say it professionally, in Spanish.
Yeah. I like you mentioned that, because I've seen in the process, I've seen other programs that the focus is a lot on the vocabulary, terms, the terminology, the jargon that is used in medicine. And it's great. It's important. And for example, if you are preparing for being an interpreter, you need to know those things. But then you face what you have just said, the way that the person from Dominican Republic is going to communicate, talking about the symptoms they're facing, right? It's just, they're not going to talk in any medical professional terms, because they don't know. They're just feeling it and they just want to find a solution. They're not a professional. So we try to keep that balance. thinking, okay, this is how you're going to, you need to be familiar with these terms in Spanish naturally, but you really have to focus on how that person is going to communicate. Spanish could have some slang naturally, and if you have already found that, that's the proof. Yeah, definitely there are some differences, and Argentinian Spanish and Mexican Spanish, for example, are just really different. The sounds of could be different, but at the same time, thankfully, it's not a difference that could really make it difficult in terms of comprehension. So what you have to work on is, or what we focus on first, is to get used to the accents.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, there are some sections. So for example, in California, I know that people are going to, and our professionals, our students are looking more for getting comfortable with Mexican Spanish, let's say. Yeah. But if you go to New York, it is going to be different because they want to get more Dominican Spanish and more Puerto Rican and even Colombian now. Yeah. I'm from Colombia, so we have many Colombians in New York now, or New Jersey, those areas. So I'm aware of that, and I expose them to listening activities and things that are related with that type of Spanish. So yeah, I'm not going to go to the little details because I think that could distract the process. It's like, I mean, I'm living in the UK. Most of my students are from the USA, but I also have students from Australia, right? And I will never been able to be professional in American English and Canadian English and British English, but I know the big picture of it. And I know which things could change or how the accents are going to variate. And based on that, then I make my best guess, right? And sometimes some Australians, I still say to them, like, can you repeat that because I couldn't understand it, right? But it's all right because I got perfect. So that's what I say, that's when you speak a second language, you have to compromise some things. So of course, even with your own language, you don't even understand all the speakers all the time. I have some difficulties understanding some people from Cuba, depending on the person, right? And I'm a native speaker, and sometimes I have to double check, like, talking about this, right? Because, a piece of paper could have a different name there, but I can double check. So that's what I invite our students to do. Is also like, yeah, it happens to us as well. You have to do a bit of guessing, but the big language, thankfully, is shared. So the main symptoms, the parts of the body, the questions that they're going to make are going to be the same, just going to change the bit of the accent, and that's where we focus on. But it's a very good question because, yeah, of course, it's one of those big concerns that we have when we start. Like, I got used to understand Colombians. What do I do when a Dominican is coming? I'm scared. So like, no. You have to get used to the sounds, which things are going to change to be ready and to extract the meaning from it. Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing because, I'm on the East Coast. So when it comes to the way Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, like you mentioned, the Colombians speak, it's very much, it can be confusing when you are in a group of mostly Dominicans and then you're with Puerto Ricans, like it's the exact same conversation, but it sounds different. So understanding those intonations, understanding like even the slang, not everybody's going to say como está the way that it's supposed to be said. If I'm meeting a friend, that is very formal. But if I'm meeting somebody in the, professional setting, I may say that, right? Not to be too friendly, I would say. So
yeah, understanding the code.
Yes, understanding the code, is great that you actually tailor your teaching or the education based on, the geographical location of your client. Even in a place like Chicago has a lot of Mexican kind of heritage when it comes to Spanish. But, there's also a mix, right? That's a different culture on its own, when you hear Chicano, then again, California is heavy in the Mexican culture, but there's also nuances of the other Spanish culture as well. So I think that is really unique to focus there. So let's go back to the medical jargons that you talked about a little earlier. Given that I'm talking about your clients in the healthcare arena, is it important that you understand not necessarily the whole medical encyclopedia, but most of what happens in healthcare, because this is the arena that your students are looking to use their Spanish so that they can perform better and get that satisfaction from the work that you do.
Yeah, exactly. So it is coming back a bit to the numbers and the months that I was mentioning before. The main reason we're capable of keeping these programs this way, like the small commitment per week, let's say, again, coming back to the realistic way of really being able to include the Spanish in your daily life and making it something achievable in the future. And all of this, being able to frame it in these periods of time make us have to make decisions about which environments or which context we're going to get comfortable with first, right? So that's why, we focus specifically on understanding the patient. I think that this is a teamwork, right? And I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a professional in healthcare, right? But then I say, well, I can help you to find the ways and specialize on your matter. You know, you are the professional, you know your thing. I can help you to make that thing, that specific practice, how to communicate that in Spanish, right? And how the patient is going to communicate. I know which verbs they're going to use most of the time. I know which actions, which ways to express discomfort they're going to be using. That's the part I help with, but you also have to walk that path. So not learning the encyclopedia in Spanish either, as you say, but at least they know now, because I have been working for years on their practice. They know which words probably are the ones, or which symptoms or which diagnosis they have to provide more often. So that's the path they walk. It's like, okay, yeah, in this, I really need to be able to understand what happens when a patient is facing this, and that. And we work on that to create the program. Now, that what gives us is the opportunity to make that person feel comfortable, or no, again, I say the word in control, but knowing what is happening in that environment.
Okay.
If I promised a student that is going to be able to be the heart of the party on a Cinco de Mayo, I would be lying, right? Because I'm not, for being able to get those goals, we have to focus on that specific environment. And right now, I've been living here in the UK for 5 years, and if I go to the mechanic, I'm worthless. I'm worthless, right? I'm very good at explaining these topics in English, building, some social life in English. Yeah. But the moment that I go to the mechanic, or the moment that I go to the bank, I feel like a little girl, I have to get comfortable with the words they're going to be using, the slang they're going to be using, all of it, because that's not my environment. And that's something that you're always going to be facing. So yeah, that's why we focus on their profession. And that's why in Fluency Lab, we work on professional aspects, right? So if you want to get better at your industry, yes. If you want to get good at social life and all of it, yeah, we can address that as well as part of your program, because it's something that it means something to you as well, which is valid, but maybe not to the point of, talking about the news and what is happening, right? Maybe that's not your priority. So let's focus on what is really going to deliver the best results for you now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what we keep in mind. And we cannot be perfect, right? So what you were saying about Chicago, that's true. It's never going to be perfect, that we can understand exactly all the nuances and the new accents and the new slang that is developing in the USA, because now with Spanglish, there's a whole new world that every week I have to learn about it. And the Spanglish that is spoken in Florida is different to the Spanglish that is spoken in Colorado. For example, I learned that last year, some of the differences. So it's impossible to get it all. Yeah. But that's what we try, to get the best result based on what the professional is providing us as well. So it's a teamwork, really.
I love the mention of Spanglish. So Spanglish, for, I don't know where you're in the world listening to us, is like a combination of Spanish and English, for survival. Yeah. We humans do things to survive. So the people that have come up with, idioms and sentences and words to substitute things based on their location and things of that nature. When that gets into a conversation, if you're learning the proper Spanish, it can kind of like confuse things a bit. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up Spanglish. So from what I understand, basically the basis of the program is for providers to, at the very basic level, understand their patients, right? And have a better understanding on maybe how to frame the treatment, how to frame whatever intervention may be needed, right, for the patient. So the reason I asked about the encyclopedia or learning medical terminology is because I had to find myself in a place where things completely don't sound the same. Because there's some Spanish words that mirror English and it makes sense. And there's some Spanish words that are completely different. So like doctor, doctora, right? Makes sense. Nurse, enfermera, that is nurse. Not anywhere close,
So
right?
different.
You
I
know,
know.
you have to let enfermera, doctora, and even with diagnosis, sometimes you're trying to educate a patient about diagnosis. Like diabetes is similar in Spanish, right? Okay. But pneumonia is not the same. So that's why I asked that question. And do you also maybe think is important for your students who are trying to learn the basis of communication when it comes to understanding their patients to also apply themselves and also knowing, depending on their area of specialties, the diagnosis, how they can be worded in Spanish and the education that goes with it. Because yes, communicating is on understanding your patient is one way, but the second way, because it's a two-way street, the second way of that road is for you to be able to communicate with your patients in a way that they too understand you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think that I have been focusing so much on the gaps that I found in previous programs or in other programs that are given for medical Spanish, which is, let's understand where it's coming the other way back. Yeah, that's why I was talking more about that. But it's true. It's very important that you mentioned that. Yeah, definitely the part of being able to give the diagnosis or the treatment or the procedure that you're going to apply is fundamental.
Yes.
It's just that sometimes people get too good at that part. Like I know it. Yeah. So now that you mention it, it's interesting because you're thinking about it as a possible part that could be missing. For me, it's been the case that they get very good at that. Like, yeah, I know how to say it. I already know that this word is going to, what you say, look different. I understand anatomy and some of the parts of in Spanish. But the moment they speak and they explain is when I get lost. So that's why I try to focus on that. It's like, okay, let's understand the patient. Otherwise you cannot really create a rapport there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, of course, part of those communications, what we do is to use, when we talk about real life content, is not that is 100% recorded at the practice, but it's based on real conversations, real situations that could be happening. And based on that, we analyze the language and we work on those two-way communication, right? What the professional has to explain and also what the patient is going to be mentioning, or the questions or the concerns that are coming back based on what the professional is saying. So yeah, it's a two-way thing. So yeah, of course they have to get comfortable with those words that definitely don't look similar at all to the English version, and also give some confidence about the ones that definitely are going to work, because there are so many cognates, many words that we share between two languages, and we have to make the most out of it. Thankfully, healthcare is one of those industries where there are many words. It's a good percentage of words that could be easily translated to Spanish. That's different in law, it's different in the construction industry. For me, it's been complicated to explain that because the vocabulary is vast, is huge, and is so different. But at least in medicine, you have some words in common. So I'm really grateful for that. And we just have to work on the other ones that, are definitely not. But it's half of the way is done, let's say. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, the communication from the professional has to also be part of the things that you're working on. for learning a second language. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think because in medicine, there's a heavy influence of Latin and Spanish
Yeah.
in the beginning of medicine. That is why we have, that similarity. So a lot of things in medicine still retain their Latin names.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
also
great.
still have.
I'm really grateful for that, because it's like, a bit of, you just have to work on the pronunciation
Right.
and it makes more sense. Yeah. So it's less words you have to worry about.
Law threw me for a loop. I did litigation. I do litigation chart review. And the one thing that kept coming up every time, like when I see it, I thought it was a name, somebody's last name or something.
Ah.
So I kept saying it every time. I'm like, how many people with this last name are practicing law? It took my wanting to educate myself to find out that that was a Spanish way of saying lawyer, abogado.
Yeah. Yeah, but abogado turns to be a very common last name. Yeah. Of course. I love that.
The Spanish culture, something that somebody who's listening may not know. In the Spanish culture, people sometimes have several last names. Sometimes you take on your mother's last name, then your father, and then it just keeps going down the line. So that was my confusion in the very beginning when I was getting exposed to the legal side of, medicine and Spanish legal side of medicine as well. And I kept saying abogado. Now I know he's lawyer. That's what it is. So not everything sounds the same. And in healthcare, thankfully, just like Angela said, we're very grateful for the Latin influence that has kind of like retained the same.
Some words, yeah.
Some words, not all of them, but, majority of them, I would say. Majority of the words have been retained, and sometimes is easier and sometimes is it takes you as a practitioner applying yourself and trying to, language translation with a person is an alternative. I do not believe is the end all and be all. No matter what you use, you don't want to lose that interpersonal connection with your patient. Because if it feels like I'm talking to somebody else who's understanding me more than you're understanding me, then why are we talking, right? That's why I'm very passionate about language translation, because I have seen the difference it makes when it's done right. And I've seen the other side of things when things go horribly wrong, when it wasn't done right or done at all, right? So that's why I developed a software that helps with that real-time conversation. If you're not in a space to, okay, it's high stress, I don't understand, or, okay, I've tried understanding, even with my knowledge, you can have something that right there can help understand word for word what is being said so that that person understands you. Because most medical mishap happens when, like you said, the provider is good doing their medical part by talking at the patient. So based on my knowledge, I'm going to talk at you. I don't quite understand the questions you're asking me, so I cannot clarify whatever else I need to clarify. So what if you're trying to tell me, okay, with all this recommendation you're giving me, I don't have support at home for somebody to help me, right? But I just had a major surgery and I'm going home to take care of myself, but I don't have support. However, when I go home, because I don't have the adequate support to take care of myself the way you recommended I take care of myself, things go bad, I get an infection, Now I have to end up back in the hospital, right? So that is a very common occurrence in healthcare where people are not understood and people don't get a chance to ask the question that they need to ask, and people don't understand all that they need to do to keep themselves healthy. So having providers who are dedicating their time and their effort to establish that trusting relationship, that doctor-patient, nurse-patient, therapy-patient, wherever you are in healthcare, and your patient, that relationship that builds trust. Because if somebody trusts you, they understand you, and they know that you're doing something to help them, they will be more forthcoming in telling you what is really going on, right?
I like you mentioned that, because it's also, if we are writing our own language,
mm-hmm.
There's some things, some stuff that make us feel really vulnerable to talk about.
Yeah.
very uncomfortable to talk about. If we feel that the other person is not really connecting with us, we're just going to close more and talk less about it. Because, and mentioning our cultural background, we could fall into that as Latin Americans, because we tend to be a bit more conservative in comparison to the United States in the way that we talk about some of the things that we're facing, those uncomfortable symptoms, those uncomfortable parts of the body or things that could be happening. So understanding that cultural background is also something that we try to explain, like, probably this person is going to take this path, or is going to avoid talking about this, or is going to, jiggle about this and that, because it's part of that discomfort that comes from talking openly about something.
Yeah.
And if that trust that you mentioned is not there, because the person just feels so exposed, and also in a cold situation where I'm looking at the practitioner, but at the same time the practitioner is looking at the at the interpreter, and it's like, but I'm here and I'm showing you what's happening, and this is it's already difficult for me to talk about this. So that's when things go wrong, and the person maybe doesn't go through the right treatment, and it could escalate into something bigger just because of that miscommunication and lack of trust or lack of understanding. So I like that you also mentioned that. I'm loving this conversation.
Thank you. That's what happens. That is real life. That is what happens every day. That unfortunately, I do get a front row seat to these kind of occurrences, and unfortunately, sometimes also for healthcare providers that are not attuned to what may have gone wrong, sometimes they tend to blame the patient. The patient is not compliant with treatment recommendation, but why? ¿Pero qué? Like, why?
¿Qué pasa?
¿Qué pasa? Like, what happened? What is going on? Like, understand that if somebody doesn't understand what they need to do, the probability is high that they're not going to do it. Right? If I don't know the importance of what to do, how to do it, when to do it,
the implications of not doing it.
Right? If I don't understand that, if you don't take time to tell me that, how am I supposed to do it? You understand? So it is very important that we as providers, especially in healthcare, you don't have to be fluent. Like you said, you're not going to go to Cinco de Mayo and be the king of or queen of Cinco. However, when somebody comes to you, you can at least understand at the very basic what.
And be there, yeah.
Exactly. And if you want to be the king and queen of Cinco de Mayo, more power to you, do it. You know, it is a great feeling to have somebody understand. And when you ask them, do they have any questions? They're like, no, I understand everything. And when you tell them, could you tell me back what we said? And they can tell you in their own way. I'm a big believer that healthcare should be in a language and culture we understand. Because if you try to enforce a particular culture that may not be mine, it's not going to lead to me trusting you. And, it's going to lead to a fracture in that relationship. I'm so glad you brought up that culture of conservatism and not talking about certain things. Even for somebody that has been in healthcare, in a healthcare practice for 15 years, there's certain things that I can say very easily in English that in my language, it still feels wrong to say. It's still heavy for me to say, right? That is because of the culture and how I was raised. You don't talk about certain body parts. You don't do certain things in public. You don't show certain whatever. All of those cultural nuances. Even as somebody who understands that there is a need to speak openly and be honest with whatever is going on with you, somebody can treat you properly. That is why I'm very passionate about education and educating in a way that is culturally competent based on a cultural group. Again, with immigration, we're all over the world, you're in UK, I'm in the US. That's not where we grew up. That's not where we were born for some of us or for most of us. But in understanding the culture, we're able to make our own impact in our own way. So I thank you for what you're doing. And I thank you for creating a space for people who are well-meaning and really do want to learn to make a difference in, their practices. And for you, Angela, what is the satisfaction that you get when you know that somebody who committed themselves to learning and doing better is happy and satisfied with the work that they're doing and they communicate that to you? How does that make you feel?
Well, I can answer that question saying that when I had to I've been working on language education for a while already, for over a decade. And when I wasn't capable of doing it, when I was feeling that it was just, again, I use the word transactional because sometimes I feel it that way. When I was just in a certain frame of how to do things and how to teach things and how to teach the language, because I think that the word of teaching a language is already a mistake in my approach of things. And it didn't work, but I was getting paid all of it. I was feeling that something was missing, and being able to create this own process, this own school, this whole thing has given me the opportunity to experiment and see what is going to deliver the best result for the people based on what they have, based on what they already know, based on the time they have, and based on the technology that we have now as well. So, for example, you were talking about the service or the product that you have. I think is a great tool that people just have to take from everywhere and take the most out of the opportunities we have. So for me, the satisfaction that I get when I've been experimenting and, trying to make, I like music, so I always think about instruments, but to get the right tune that delivers the best result. And then I get that feeling of happiness. I'm very emotional. So for me, that feeling of achievement, that I'm seeing my progress, because I see the progress of my students, but they don't see their own progress. We were very hard on ourselves. Like, nah, I'm really bad at this. I still don't understand. And you put me those audios and I don't get, it's like, don't worry. I can see, I'm just pushing you. You're getting a lot of progress. So for me, when they realize that, when it dawns on them, it's like, wait a second. I've been listening to this person. I've been talking to this person. I'm explaining, maybe checking online the right words to give the right treatment because it's fair. You have to double check that you are not making a mistake, but you can read the guidance and you say, yeah, that's exactly the word I need to use. That's exactly the instruction I need to give, because I understand it. It's like, wow, that's great. So those moments when my students realize that all what we have been working on during the past months is making sense and they feel that improvement, it's just brilliant. And because I know what is behind, it's a work that is done with that student, so I'm making my part, but I'm not teaching the language. I'm just guiding that person into finding exactly which situations and which approaches are going to work best for them. So I hope that answer makes sense, because I'm just thinking, I'm just going everywhere. But anyways, that's my answer.
No, it does. And, there's a satisfaction that comes with making an impact and helping somebody along their journey. So it doesn't matter what that journey is. And sometimes that person may not even see their progress, but they need you as a cheerleader, to like, no, I see it. You're doing good. And maybe that's just the push or the support that they needed at the time to continue their journey. Because yes, we're hard on ourselves as individuals. So if I'm hard on myself and then you're hard on me, then what's the point of continuing?
Depressing. And life is hard on yourself. So what do you have now? What is left?
Nothing, just give up, and it's easy to give up. So that is great that you are that cheerleader and, pushing people to their best potential. So Angela, let's talk about where everybody can find you. So if there's anybody that is listening to you, whether in construction, in business, in law, healthcare, all the areas that you cover, even retail, right? They're listening to us and they want to either improve themselves, improve their staff, understanding of Spanish and in relation to their customers, their clientele, their patients. How can they reach you? How can they find you?
Well, the way to find us is, we're on all social media, and I'm going to share with you some of not all social media, but the main social media. You can find us with the Fluency Lab name. However, the website is exactly the same, fluencylab.co. So it's not .com, it's .co. right? And there you can find all the procedure, how we receive new students. We always give them the chance to plan with us, so they can meet and talk with me and see, okay, this is what I want to achieve. This is the time I have. This is what has been my experience with Spanish or with languages. Some people already speak a second language, so Spanish is going to be the third. There are some cases. This is what I have. So we talk about it, we discuss it, I assess their level, all of it. And after that, I provide them roadmap, whether they want to use it with us, because of course it's our motivation that they enroll, but, or they want to continue on their own, or they, whatever, they know exactly like how realistically they can achieve that goal that they have. What is the best way to approach it, the best practices, the things that we have seen that tends to work better for that. So they're going to receive that after that hour. If they want to join, great, but at least they have the chance to get to know, what are the possibilities they have for achieving that level or that goal. So that's something that they can find on the website. And sometimes we run some webinars as well. So in June, it's coming the next one. So it's on the 5th of June. We're going to be talking about those words that the patients always use to talk about their symptoms. So at least they get a grasp of those words, and then we give them some strategies to get comfortable with understanding, with the listening part. That is something that some people get scared. So yeah, that's going to be happening on the 5th of June. If they want to enroll, this is a free workshop. And if not, directly, you can go to fluencylab.co to check that roadmap planning that we have for everyone.
Beautiful. So we're going to make all of that information available in the show notes, website, and all the socials handles. So feel free to go explore, look forward to the webinar, and see if this is right for you. Again, you're not going to know if it's right for you if you're not asking questions. So explore and ask the questions, whatever question it is, present it. And it's an additional thing to have in addition to your credentials and your knowledge. Is something that will help, in serving your patient population and clientele, I believe. So learning another language, or at least understanding the basics of communication of another language, goes a long way. And especially in the United States, we do have a lot of Spanish representation in healthcare when it comes to patient-client, whatever you call them, members, right? So it is useful. So it'll help build that relation and that bond, like Angela said. So Angela, before I let you go, usually I ask my guest to leave our listeners with what I call golden nuggets. So you've left a lot of gems, okay? So what is the one thing that you can tell anybody listening to us today about learning a second language, learning Spanish, or connecting with a patient, whatever it is that you would like to let our listeners take away from this conversation?
I think I'm just thinking of two things right now is stop worrying about feeling that you are too old to do it. Because I work entirely with adults, so I know that's the main concern. Is like, I wish, that they're looking back. If my parents would have put me in Spanish lessons when I was three years old, it would have been amazing. I would already be in a bilingual. Yes, that would be great. But it's not the case. But that doesn't mean that you cannot do it. Yes. Or that Spanish or languages is not my thing. I've always been bad at it. Some people approaches these processes with that belief. So I would say, get rid of that, please. It's really so damaging to you, and it's unfair on you, because what you experience at school with other 40 kids learning Spanish at the same time is not what you should take as the truth. Like, okay, yeah, I'm just bad at languages. I always failed Spanish. I always failed French or whatever, right? So get rid of that, please. That's the first gem. That really helps. And the second one is be curious. Like, keep always wondering what would be the best way to do this. Curiosity is really the best tool for learning anything. And probably something I love about working with professionals is that people already know how they feel and how they approach their own practice or their own industry. So they keep reading papers, learning about the last things that are happening, attending workshops, updating themselves. That curiosity that you feel towards your profession, because you know how important it is for giving the best. That's also the same approach that you need to have with learning a second language, with anything really. It's just thinking, okay, how could I do this better? Feel curious, try things, fail, that maybe it doesn't work. I bought that CD that promised me to teach me Spanish while I sleep and it didn't work. Doesn't matter, I tried it, right? But things like that curiosity of finding ways to get your way to feel more comfortable with the language, that really makes a difference.
Absolutely, I agree. Keep trying.
I'm not recommending the CDs for sleeping and learning Spanish, by the way. By the way,
she's not recommending it. But however, if you've tried it, it doesn't mean that is the end of it. Please.
Maybe you learn something.
Maybe you learn something. Who knows? But it's never one and done in life. You can try a few things, and out of 5 things you try, only one works. So, but if you did not keep trying to see what would work, how would you get to that one that worked? So, yeah, explore. You're never too old to learn a second language. It's never too late to learn a second language. And try, because when you have somebody who in real time can support you, it makes the difference. It does. Learning alone is very isolating. Okay. So when you have somebody to say, oh, that's correct. Or, I know that there are a lot of apps there that, will give you feedback, ding, that, all that, bells, but it doesn't negate human connection. Just that's my take. So go explore, Angela. Again, I talked about my software, Altruistic Scribe. Explore that as well. All of this is for language conversation. All of this is for us to meet people where they are and provide the best service that we can to people. Both of them, real-time conversation, in-person real-time conversation, utilizing a software to have a real-time conversation.
All of it is for providing the best result. And I think the most you can do it, is like going to the gym and eating healthy food. They're not competing with each other. They just make the result even better. So I think that's the case.
Why not?
Yeah.
So explore whatever works for you.
Yeah.
Explore it. Let us know what you think about this conversation. Let us know if this was relatable. If you've explored the 2 options, let us know what you think. We appreciate your feedback, and please go and check Angela out. Again, like he said, everything is going to be in the show notes. So if you don't remember, okay, what was that said? Don't worry. We can provide the link. We will provide the link, and you can click in and get to Angela. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Angela, it was a pleasure having you on. I've been looking forward to us having this conversation for a while now, since we first met. So I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been great. So thank you very much for all this time. And I think that we both reach very, very good points. And I hope that your listeners are going to feel inspired after this.
I believe they will. Thank you so much. I'm grateful for you being here. Thank all of you for listening. Grateful for you as well. So let us know what you think. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.